Well, we're back to talk about aliens.
And NASA.
Yep. Alien mummies.
Government confirmed photos. These are legit, you guys. There's a whole lot of deniers, but
a lot of truth to it as well.
Yeah.
I think.
And we're here to share it with you today. Super excited.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So we're starting off with a photo that was apparently lost for decades, but just resurfaced a few years ago. The Calvine photo, said to be one of the most convincing UFO photographs ever taken. On August 4th of 1990, two men who were working as chefs in a hotel in the Scottish Highlands decided to go for a walk that summer evening in the hills near Calvine. And in the middle of their hike, they spotted something in the sky, this big diamond-shaped object hovering up there. Apparently it made little to no noise as well. They managed to snap this picture here. The hikers sent the image to the paper, but instead of printing it, the newspaper handed it over to the British Ministry of Defence, and they kept it under wraps until 2022, when British journalist David Clarke finally brought it back into the light. After digging for 13 years, Clarke, who teaches at Sheffield Hallam University, discovered that a former Royal Air Force press officer, Craig Lindsay, had a copy of the photo all along, waiting for someone to ask about it. Clarke also had his colleague Andrew Robinson, a photography expert, examine the photo. Robinson found no evidence of tampering or manipulation. So, is this flying object of extraterrestrial origin? Well, Clarke believes it is a genuine UFO, just maybe not an alien aircraft. He thinks it could be the rumored Aurora, a super secret spy plane supposedly built by the US in the 80s.
Next up on our list today, we have a series of photographs of real-life aliens found in 2017 in Peru near the pre-Columbian Nazca lines. Analysis done on the body of the aliens, named Clara and Mauricio, showed that they are at least 1,000 years old and that their genetic makeup is not of this world. Although the findings are controversial, that's to be expected, and widely disputed, also expected, many people believe that Clara and Mauricio are modern civilization's first look at real-life humanoid alien bodies, and they see the discovery as a major scientific advancement in relation to our understanding of extraterrestrial beings. The lead researcher on the case said that the bodies, with 3 fingers on each hand and elongated heads, were found with another, going by the name of Victoria, which was used to conduct the tests that determined the age of the bodies and the genetic material. In the report, lead researcher Musan also stated that Victoria had been carrying eggs inside of her, meaning that it was likely these creatures were able to reproduce offspring and that Victoria was getting ready to when she died. Whether or not the whole thing is a big elaborate hoax remains to be seen. However, despite harsh criticism coming from Musan's peers and the scientific community as a whole, he continues to maintain the validity of his findings, making this kind of believable.
Take a look at these wild photos. These are some genuinely unsettling images right here. There's a lot of mystery behind these pictures. There's still no definitive explanation for them. All we know is that the photos surfaced about 10 years back. Supposedly, they were taken from a US submarine traveling between Iceland and islands near Norway. Alex Mistretta, a paranormal investigator, started looking into these pictures after they popped up in a French magazine called Top Secret, following a supposed leak. The photos were allegedly snapped in March of 1971 through the submarine USS Trepang's periscope during a regular military and science mission. A guy named John Kalika first spotted the UFOs through the periscope. We don't know who actually took the images. The pics were shared to the public by Alex after he saw them in that magazine, and there were some curious notes on the back of one of the photos. It said official photograph, not to be released, CT, and another note that read unauthorized disclosure subject, security certificate SSN 674, criminal sanction. I don't know, what do you guys think of these? Genuine, hoax? I mean, some of these images are pretty insane. I mean, if they weren't doctored in any way.
Next on our list today, we have the McMinville UFO photographs taken in none other than Sheridan, Oregon, approximately 9 miles southwest of McMinville by a local farming couple, Paul and Evelyn Trent. On May 11th of 1950, the pair spotted these strange objects in the sky and rushed to grab their camera. They then captured some of the most captivating UFO images to date. It was Evelyn who first noticed the alleged spacecraft hovering in the sky above the farm. She yelled for her husband Paul, who also confirmed the sighting and was the one to capture the images. Paul's father also claimed to have caught a glimpse of the object before it sped off into the sky. Don't know why I did that. A third-party analysis confirmed that the photographs were not doctored and that they showed a real physical object in the sky above the Trent family farm, and that the object was sitting at a significant distance from the lens of the camera. So basically, it was proven that it wasn't just some kind of bug flying nearby the lens. Whether or not you believe in aliens, UFOs, or UAPs, you gotta admit these images are pretty cool.
And number 10 is dragons. I'm serious, y'all. Dragons, those legendary creatures, may not be just myths. Though we lack concrete proof, the idea of their existence holds intriguing possibilities. You see, if dragons once walked among us, their skeletal structure would likely have necessitated incredibly light bones for flight, akin to birds. This attribute would make the preservation of their bones through fossilization an exceedingly challenging feat. Another point of evidence is that, curiously, our human instinct to duck might be more than just a quirk. It could be an ancestral echo of an avian prey response, despite humans lacking natural avian predators. Now, what's truly fascinating is the simultaneous appearance of dragons across various ancient cultures. These parallel depictions, emerging independently, suggest a shared experience rather than a cultural exchange of ideas. The universality of these visions raises questions about whether these creatures might have actually existed, leaving us to contemplate the possible reality of these awe-inspiring beings that once roamed our world. And number 9 is the direwolf. The direwolf is a creature that disappeared from the scene roughly 13,000 years ago. Imagine a wolf, but much bulkier, tipping the scales at 130 to 150 pounds. That's some considerable heft. Yet, don't mistake them for speed demons. Direwolves had shorter limbs, so they wouldn't win any races. In the grand tree of Candids, they branched off from modern wolves about 5.7 million years ago, making them distant relatives of today's lupines. What's even more intriguing is that these creatures evolved exclusively in North America, distinct from their cousins who occasionally crossed the continents. They also didn't mix genes with coyotes or gray wolves, so direwolves were unique, evolutionary marvels that once walked among us, contributing to the rich tapestry of our planet's history. If you're enjoying the video so far, you could support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. I personally would really appreciate it. At number 8 is Neanderthals. You ever wonder why we're the only species on this planet that's traveled to space, painted the Mona Lisa, or invented Velcro? It's a bit odd, considering our closest relatives like chimpanzees and bonobos haven't shown much ambition in those areas. But it turns out that there have been other species like us, and we actually had a hand in their extinction. About 6 million years ago, some apes in our family tree evolved into the genus Homo, and from there, things got interesting. Our ancestors traded tree swinging for walking upright and developed big brains, allowing us to create tools, hunt, and build shelters. Now here's where it gets fascinating. By the time Homo sapiens came along around 300,000 years ago, we were the 9th Homo species, and one of the other 9 was the Neanderthals. These folks were our closest relatives, shorter and stockier, but with big brains too. They lived in challenging environments and even buried their fallen, suggesting symbolic behavior linked to language. But here's the twist. It seems that we weren't the best of friends with the Neanderthals. As we moved into Europe, their numbers declined, possibly due to competition for resources, and we might have outmatched them in the end. Might have? I think actually evidenced by the fact that we're not Neanderthals, I think we did. Yet here's the plot twist. See, we didn't just defeat the Neanderthals, we also got cozy with them. DNA evidence shows that we mated with them and their genetic legacy lives on within us. Humans are 1 to 8% Neanderthal, genetically speaking. And there's even more DNA from other mysterious ancient humans that we shared a bed with, like the Denisovians. So imagine this, there might have been these extinct alien-like species walking among us, but instead of coexisting peacefully, we might have played a part in their disappearance. It's a wild chapter in our human history, and it's all right there in our genes. At number 7 is the Argentavis. This colossal avian of ancient times was truly a sight to behold. With an impressive wingspan of up to 24 feet, twice the size of today's largest birds. This feathered giant dominated the prehistoric skies. Picture the awe and fear of witnessing such a massive creature soaring above. Interestingly, despite its enormous size, Argentavis wasn't a fierce predator, but a scavenger. Preferring already deceased meals, it posed less of a threat to living creatures. To take flight, these birds probably relied on mountainous terrain, using wind patterns and slopes for takeoff due to their hefty bodies. Moreover, their reproductive strategy likely involved raising a small number of young for extended periods, increasing their chances of survival. Through their dependence on thermal air currents and strategic living spaces, these magnificent birds navigated their ancient world, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most massive flying creatures to have ever graced the skies. At number 6 is the Megalodon. Of course. You know, when we think about our ancient creatures that once roamed the earth, it's not just the land-based dinosaurs that grab our attention. There were some remarkable sea dwellers too, and among them was the Megalodon. Picture this. He's a colossal shark, the biggest to ever exist, cruising through prehistoric oceans. Imagine being out in the open ocean and suddenly encountering a massive 50-foot long shark with teeth bigger than your head. Yeah, that's what the Megalodon was like, a real-life sea monster. This colossal shark was a true apex predator, ruling the oceans with its enormous size and insatiable appetite. It had a preference for dining on whales, dolphins, porpoises, and even giant sea turtles. Fossils of whale bones with Megalodon tooth marks are evidence of its incredible power and dominance in the ancient seas. So what led to the Megalodon's disappearance? Well, it's believed that changing environmental conditions played a significant role in its disappearance. About 2.6 million years ago, the Earth began to cool, entering a period of global cooling. This change in climate impacted the Megalodon's habitat as it thrived in warm tropical waters. As these warm waters shrank, it led to a reduction in its primary food sources and potentially made the shallowy coastal waters where it gave birth to its young too cold to sustain the species. And just like that, one of the most formidable predators to ever exist became an ancient legend of the sea.
The Roswell incident is arguably the most famous UFO crash in history, although the government would claim otherwise. Basically, on June 24th of 1947, while searching for a crashed military aircraft, pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 UFOs flying over the Cascade Mountains of Washington state in the US. The objects were flying in formation at a height of about 10,000 feet and a speed of approximately 1,900 kilometers per hour, which was not possible at the time, for humans that is. Kenneth described the way the objects moved as jerky, like rocks skipping over the water, flashing forward at strange intervals. When the media got a hold of the story, they coined the phrase flying saucer, and the UFO craze took off at hyperspeed. Especially when on July 7th, a local rancher named Mac Brazel called the sheriff to let him know that one of those objects had somehow ended up on his farm, and this came to be known as the Roswell incident.
It was back in July of 1947 that something strange happened near Roswell, New Mexico. Something had crashed into the ground, into Brazel's farm. There were metal pieces, rubber strips, and a strange tin foil-like material. The nearby Roswell Army airfield was alerted. The military came out and collected the debris. At first, they issued a press release saying they had recovered an unknown flying disc. This really got people talking, but just a day later the Army changed their story, saying it was actually just a weather balloon. Now, while some of the public took this at face value, it caused some controversy, especially in the years to come. People started to believe that the military was covering up something much bigger, possibly an alien spacecraft crash. Over the years, people started to come forward claiming to have seen the wreckage, and not only were there strange markings on the material described by some as hieroglyphics, but the material was incredibly strong and seemed to almost be impossible to burn. Oh, and of course, people who'd been called to the site to recover the material claimed to have seen bodies that were clearly not human. Over the years, many people have questioned the official explanation for this incident. Even former military personnel and locals said they saw strange things at the crash site, like debris that didn't look like it came from any known aircraft, and even small bodies that didn't seem human. In 1994, the US Air Force released a report saying the debris was from a top-secret project called Project Mogul, a project that used high-altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. They said the unusual materials found were just parts of these balloons and their sensors, but this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. In 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, the Air Force released another report to address the claims about these alien bodies. They said these were actually just crash test dummies used in military experiments, not extraterrestrial beings. But again, a lot of people were and still are highly skeptical of this. The Roswell incident happened less than 2 years after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan in 1945. Those bombs were created through a secret project that lasted 3 years and had 3 main sites, including one in New Mexico. So if the government could keep the atomic bomb a secret for so long, why wouldn't they be able and willing to hide information about a crashed UFO landing? Plus, little mannequins? I think most people would look at that and be able to tell the difference between an alien and a crash test dummy.
The Sumerian people, the earliest known civilization who lived in ancient Sumer in Mesopotamia, are incredibly fascinating and confusing. It is believed that the civilization resided in Sumer, which is now southern Iraq, sometime between 4500 and 4000 BC, after arriving from the south, having traveled through the Persian Gulf. Early settlers were experts in farming, raising cattle, weaving textiles, carpentry, pottery, and even brewing beer. By the year 3000 BC, the population had become incredibly advanced, building massive pyramid-like structures long before the ancient Egyptians. And by 2800 BC, the civilization reached its peak population, somewhere between 40 to 80,000 people living within the city's 6 miles of definitive walls. It is believed that the Sumerian civilization invented pyramids, the wheel, script, arithmetic, geometry, irrigation, saws and other tools, candles, chariots, harpoons, and beer. It is also believed by some that the reason this civilization was so advanced is because of their interactions with aliens. Interactions many claim to be depicted in the Summer's Triumph Tapestry, which was created in 1538 in the Flemish region of Belgium. If you look closely, you can see what appear to be UFOs depicted in the skies above the Sumerian people. Coincidence? Perhaps, or maybe something else entirely. If it is true that the ancient Sumerians got help from extraterrestrial beings, it is safe to say that not only did aliens alter our reality, they actually had a hand in creating it entirely, as the ancient Sumerians are often credited with creating the building blocks that shaped modern society as we know it today.
This has become a pretty famous photograph. The strange figure in the photo has been dubbed the Ilkley Moor creature. On December 1st, 1987, a former police officer going by the pseudonym Philip Spencer was on a morning walk in Ilkley Moor in West Yorkshire, England, when he spotted a strange creature standing on a hillside next to the road. He'd managed to snap a picture of it before it ran off. Spencer chased after it, but it disappeared into the brush. It was then that he witnessed a large disc-like object fly into the sky. It made a loud humming noise, almost like a helicopter. Whatever this thing was, though, it wasn't a chopper. It was whitish in color and consisted of 2 saucer shapes stacked on top of one another and took off at an incredible speed. Spencer headed back home and was horrified to realize that nearly 3 hours had gone by that were completely unaccounted for.
How's this for an alien encounter? On December 29th of 2012, a fireball appeared over the skies of Sri Lanka. A fireball that was later determined to have been a meteorite. A meteorite that scientists confirmed contained genuine alien fossils. Now before you quit your job and go scream "I told you so" at your wife, I should probably clarify that when I say alien fossils, I don't mean bones or anything like that. I'm talking about microfossils and algae that, according to Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe and researchers from the Jamie Wallace Cardiff School of Mathematics, are not of terrestrial origin, meaning that the fossils and algae found inside of the meteorites were one of the first confirmed signs of alien life in recorded history. Perhaps the most exciting thing about this discovery, other than proving the existence of life outside of Earth, is that it provides compelling evidence of panspermia, the hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe and is spread to different planets by meteors and other solid space debris. degrees. An interesting theory that may very well provide us with the answer of how humans ended up on Earth in the first place and why many depictions of aliens are described as humanoid. I mean, if we all evolved from the same thing, it makes sense that we would kind of look alike, right? Object orbiting Earth above our atmosphere, man-made with no earthly origins. It's the Black Knight satellite, an alien surveillance device used to monitor Earth for the past 13,000 years, or so they say. The device was first detected by Nikola Tesla in 1899 and then by Marconi and Jorgen Hals a few years later, and it was confirmed in the early 20th century by amateur radio operators, and it was first reported in the news in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Apparently, the satellite is not only a monitoring device deployed by aliens to observe the going-ons of Earth, but supposedly, based on radio signals coming from the contraption, it also contains a map to a faraway planet called Epsilon Bootis. Nice. While some skeptics have claimed the object to be nothing more than just a piece of old space junk, it should be noted that space junk doesn't exhibit many of the properties exhibited by the Black Knight satellite, especially sending out distinguishable and decodable radio signals.
This next question that's probably on your mind is, why is it here? And if you're not so sold on the alien thing, well, where could it be from then? Well, there are tons of possibilities, from something as boring as space junk, which is what NASA claims, to more outlandish but interesting ideas like a time capsule from the future. This idea is very Star Trek-y, but let's just imagine, if you will, for a moment that our future selves, hundreds or even thousands of years from now, have figured out how to send messages or artifacts back in time. Well, maybe the Black Knight satellite is one of these time capsules. Perhaps it could be carrying important info or advanced technology that could help us in the very near future. Maybe it has the solution to climate change, or a cure for some major disease that's coming in the very near future, or new energy sources. If we could crack the code, who knows how much it could boost our progress? What if the satellite is more like a history book, preserving our achievements and mistakes for future generations? This way, even if a disaster strikes, our story wouldn't be lost forever. The idea is kinda like sending a message in a bottle, of course, just way more high tech. And yeah, there's no real proof of this, but if things did get crappy enough in the distant future that we decided we needed to change the course of history, I mean, why wouldn't we try to send some kind of signal back in time if we had the ability to do so?
As I mentioned, the object was first discovered by Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil, in 1899 in Colorado Springs. Tesla had built a large tower to see if he could detect any going-ons in the atmosphere, and he did. Kind of. When the tower first began receiving transmissions, composed of numbers at regular intervals, he assumed that they were coming from the atmosphere, but it didn't take him long to realize that they were actually coming from above our atmosphere in space. He was quoted in a local paper saying, "I believe numbers are being used for communication because numbers are universal." A few years later, Marconi, the inventor of the wireless radio, intercepted the same signals, and a few years after that, a Norwegian engineer observed something as well. Jorgen Hals noticed that the transmissions coming from the object sent out on a certain wavelength were somehow being sent back to where they originated from a few seconds later, which isn't that weird. I mean, radio echoes aren't unheard of, but what was weird was the timing. You see, generally radio echoes are consistent and take place just a few seconds after the original signal hits its destination, but these ones were different. They were inconsistent, and some took up to 15 seconds to bounce back. The signals became known as long delayed echoes, or LDE, a phenomenon observed many times over the years that is still yet to be explained.
So in 1973, Scottish researcher and author Duncan Lunnon claimed to have discovered messages from a supposed alien probe. Lunnon analyzed those long-delayed radio echoes, which are strange signals bouncing back to Earth with that delay, and he thought these echoes contained a hidden message from an extraterrestrial probe orbiting Earth, the Black Knight. Lunnon's theory was that the satellite was sending a star map, pinpointing the Epsilon Bootis star system, and according to him, this message was from an alien civilization trying to communicate with us. According to him, the message went as follows. Start here. Our home is in Epsilon Bootis, which is a double star. We live on the 6th planet of 7 coming from the sun, which is the larger of the two. Our 6th planet has 1 moon. Our 4th planet has 3. Our 1st and 3rd planets each have 1. Our probe is in the position of Arcturus, known in our maps.
So first up in our number 10 spot are zombie stars. Back in 2014, NASA announced it had discovered a star system that had been the victim of a fairly weak supernova explosion they referred to as SN2012Z. Now, boring scientific name aside, normally when a star supernovas, that's kind of it. But in the case of the zombie stars, scientists found that a part of the system's dwarf star may have somehow survived, kind of like the undead. And while they haven't officially confirmed anything just yet, that only makes it all the more suspicious. However, that's not even the wildest part. Apparently, another reason they're called zombie stars is that they scream as they eat other stars. As NASA explained, several seemingly dead stars are emitting high energy X-rays that could well be their howls or screams, which is just about the weirdest and scariest thing I have ever learned about. Moving on to number 9, the faces of Mars. There are many things I could guess you might find in space. Space junk, satellites, maybe even an alien if you're lucky, but the last thing I would probably guess would be a human face on the surface of the red planet. Well, back in 1976, while circling Mars in search of landing sites for its sister ship, the Viking 1 snapped a few photos that were intended for NASA engineers to study. Now, the strange thing about this photo is obvious. It appears as though there is a human face-shaped object on the surface of another planet, which, I mean, just brings up so many questions. Now, as far as NASA has officially announced, it's nothing too exciting, just merely a huge rock formation which resembles a human head formed by shadows, giving the illusion of eyes, nose, and mouth. However, this hasn't deterred conspiracy theorists from getting their 2 cents in, and some believe that it could all be a cover-up for some kind of alien life on Mars. More specifically, the theory states that the face is the remnant of an alien civilization, while also suggesting that other rocky formations in the area could be a crumbling extraterrestrial city, almost like some kind of alien Atlantis, which not only would make a very cool sci-fi movie, but would be a mind-blowing cover-up if it turned out to be true. Coming in at number 8, space snakes. It's one thing when there's an alleged alien sighting from your neighbor down the street, but it really feels a lot more intense when the creature in question was actually spotted by an astronaut while in space. The astronaut in question is Dr. Story Musgraves, who is not only a decorated former astronaut, but also a physician and consultant. And according to him, he witnessed a strange creature on 2 separate occasions while in space. Quote, "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It is rubbery because it has internal waves in it, and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there. And that sort of brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, of course, many were skeptical of his space snake sighting, and theories like it being a hose or a piece of space debris have been used to discredit him, but Musgraves has never once wavered and insists on what he saw. Quote, "Other living creatures are out there, and other civilizations that have been around for 1,000,000 years that are doing unimaginable kinds of things." Coming in at number 7, wow signal. Back in 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman was researching at the Ohio State University when an incredible and unexplainable radio signal was detected using the school's Big Ear telescope. In those days, information was run through what was called an IBM 1130 mainframe computer before being printed on paper and then studied by hand. Upon reviewing the findings, Jerry came across something he had never seen before. There, in a vertical column, was the sequence 6EQUJ5. Jerry was flabbergasted and immediately circled the sequence and wrote "wow" right beside it, hence the name. The signal they picked up had come from nearly 220 million light years away, and there was no explanation as to how or why a radio signal could be detected from that distance. It immediately became a sensation in both the science community and the rest of the world, and was used to support the search for alien life in the universe.
Jerry himself says he's convinced that it certainly has the potential to be the first signal from extraterrestrial intelligence, but despite best efforts, no such signal has ever been seen since, which only makes it all the more intriguing. Next up at number 6, alien cover-up. Back in April of 1979, Viktor Afanasyev lifted off and began making his way to the Salyut 6 space station. However, while he was making his way there, he claims to have witnessed a very strange sight. Quote, "It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered to the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long with inner hulls. The object was narrow here and wider here, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away." Now that in and of itself is a little suspicious. Victor also claims to have continually reported back to Mission Control about its size, shape, and position. But when the cosmonaut returned to Earth, he was allegedly debriefed and ordered not to talk to anyone about it ever. And to make matters even stranger, he claims his cameras were confiscated and his photos and his voice transmissions from space have never been released. I mean, that definitely sounds like someone is hiding something if you ask me. Moving on to number 5. Eridanus supervoid. The Eridanus supervoid is an extremely large and eternally empty chunk of, well, space that, from what scientists can tell, is around 1 billion light years in diameter. For reference, 1 light year is supposed to be about 9 trillion kilometers or 6 trillion miles. So times 9 trillion by 1 billion, and that's how big this giant supervoid is. Now, as far as astronomical standards go, that's a hefty size. And this supervoid is so large that so far it can't be explained by the current theories of the universe, which is pretty unnerving in a few ways. The most straightforward theory about the supervoid suggests the existence of an insanely massive black hole that would have the power to suck in stars, planets, light, and dark matter, among other space stuff, and that with each inhale of the universe, it will get stronger and stronger. All of which sounds horrifying. But that's not the only theory. Some researchers propose the void is actually evidence of a parallel universe, maybe even one being controlled by a horde of ruthless aliens. Of course, the second theory requires some more concrete evidence, but either way, this supervoid still seems pretty freaky. Moving on to number 4, the end of the universe. It's no secret that eventually, billions of years from now, the sun will expand into a red giant and kill the Earth. But what is a little more up for debate is how the entire universe itself will die. According to the BBC, some scientists feel the universe will perish via heat death, which suggests that heat itself will die and the entire universe will freeze just a tick above absolute zero. Another theory, called the Big Crunch theory, which is almost the exact opposite of the Big Bang, suggests that the universe will continue expanding until that's all it can expand, and when it can expand no more, everything will contract and collapse into itself. Then there is the Big Change theory, where bubbles of dark energy consume our universe, rendering everything inhospitable to the point where even atoms might not form anymore. And finally, the Big Rip theory, where dark energy would expand, become more massive, and just tear galaxies to pieces. Now, these are all just theories, of course, but each one sounds as terrifying as the last. At least it won't be happening for a very long time. Coming in at number 3, a scary supernova. To break it down, supernovas are pretty much giant star explosions, and they aren't uncommon, so it's not usually something that would seem too scary. But apparently, the ASA SSN-15LH was a supernova unlike any other. For starters, it was a superluminous supernova, observed in June of 2015, that originated 2.8 billion light years away, which would mean that it actually exploded 2.8 billion years ago. But what makes it special, or scary, I guess, is that scientists can't explain it. Unlike a regular supernova, this one was 10 times brighter and considerably more powerful. Also, when astronomers analyzed the light it was emitting, they couldn't find evidence of the hydrogen that should have been present. The initial explanation for the massive supernova involved what's called a magnetar, which is kind of a magnetic neutron star, and the theory was that the powerful magnetic field it provides could have added extra energy to the expanding ball of superheated gas. But then they realized that this scary star emitted more energy than a magnetar would have been able to provide. And apparently, even months after the boom, it was still giving off more energy than the entire Milky Way. Honestly, the more they try to figure out, the more confusing it seems to be. And if some of the smartest people in the world can't figure out what's going on, well, that's pretty scary. Moving on to number 2. The Great Attractor. As if giant exploding stars and potential alien life forms were not enough to get you freaked out, there is also a phenomenon galaxy that is essentially the universe equivalent of being dragged toward an inescapable doom. Essentially what's happening is that the Milky Way, its companion galaxies, and various other galactic stuff are all moving toward an area of space at a speed of 2.2 million kilometers per hour. Now, to ease you a bit, while that is very fast for us, it's apparently slower in space terms, but we still don't really know what is dragging all the matter in that direction. According to scientists, the speed at which we are moving implies an area of space creating a massive gravitational force, roughly equivalent to 10,000 galaxies. And since it is sucking in everything within a considerable distance, this mysterious region has been dubbed the Great Attractor. However, we can't actually see it, so we're kind of being dragged blindly. The reason being is that the Great Attractor sits in a region of space referred to by astronomers as the zone of avoidance. And it's called that because it sits exactly on the other side of the densest part of the Milky Way, thus observing it through all those stars and massive clouds of space dust is nearly impossible. How fun, right? And last up in our number 1 spot, GRB. Short for gamma ray bursts, GRBs are basically giant, super long explosions of energy. Now, the good news is that none have ever been observed in our own galaxy, and they apparently don't happen all too often in other galaxies. But that also means scientists don't know as much about them as they would like to. As NASA explains, GRBs might be caused by low energy gamma rays that once exposed to space explode into high energy rays, but that is just one of the ongoing theories at this point. But the terrifying reality of GRBs doesn't end at a lack of complete understanding. A 2014 study showed frequent GRB explosions have left swaths of the universe completely inhospitable. That study also said there's a good chance a GRB was the cause of at least one mass extinction event in Earth's history. Meaning that if a GRB ever landed in our galaxy, the human race could, in theory, be completely wiped out.
Oh, a couple of guys found some irregular radio signals coming from space. So what? Well, this what? On May 14th of 1954, 3 years prior to Sputnik becoming the first satellite in orbit, newspapers received a story from Major Donald Keyhole, a Marine Corps major, naval aviator, and future founder of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, or NICAP. Keyhole told the papers that there were already 1 or possibly even 2 non-organic satellites already orbiting Earth. After the story broke, a group of government scientists began attempting to track the objects, when they came across radio signals that matched the description of the ones Tesla had found back in 1899. After that, NASA located the signal and France confirmed it. Years later, after Sputnik's deployment, the US began to worry if the signals might have been coming from a Russian spy satellite, but in 1957 that theory was disproved when a researcher from Venezuela noticed a mysterious object while observing Sputnik in its prograde orbit, west to east, along with the rotation of the Earth. This object was orbiting in retrograde, east to west, opposite the rotation of the Earth, which was technology that hadn't been invented yet, leading them to believe it must not have been made on Earth.
So this is said to be the first photographic evidence of the Black Knight, captured in 1998 during the STS-88 mission. It's a pretty fantastic image, not just because it's breathtaking, which it absolutely is, but because of how clear it is. There is an object floating through space here, clear as day. STS-88 was NASA's first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station. During the mission, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour captured a series of photographs that some believe show the mysterious Black Knight satellite. Now, a lot of people were very excited when these photos were released. Just what the hell was this thing? Were we really looking at a genuine UFO? Well, NASA kinda crashed the party. They just said the object was a thermal blanket that had come loose during a spacewalk, and sure, this was a letdown to some. To others, it didn't change anything. To people who believe in the satellite's mysterious origins, the thermal blanket story is just another cover-up.
Here's another. Of course, when it comes to the subject of an alien satellite that the general public has not yet been made explicitly aware of, there is obviously going to be a number of cover-ups involved. In this case, the cover-up of the research conducted by and presented to the Observatory of Paris by Jacques Vallée, who is still alive today and still incredibly passionate about the subject of the Black Knight satellite. Over the course of his career, Jacques observed, tracked, photographed, and even filmed the massive 15-ton satellite that, at the time, no rocket on Earth would have been able to deploy. When he was satisfied with the amount of evidence he had gathered, he presented his findings to the observatory for publishing. In response to his presentation, the observatory promptly confiscated his files, erased all of his photos, and destroyed his tapes. Their reason? They were embarrassed because they could not definitively say what the object was, nor could they source its exact origin. I smell BS.
That was me, by the way. I gotta hit the bathroom after this. So dumb. What if the Black Knight isn't from the future at all, but the exact opposite, the distant past, launched by our ancient ancestors using advanced technology, a lost civilization like Atlantis or some other unknown empire that had tech as good as or even better than ours? They might have sent the object up for all sorts of reasons, but the one that's most intriguing to me is that the Black Knight satellite could be a sort of time capsule containing sacred artifacts or even DNA from a highly advanced ancient civilization that knew it was on the decline, or maybe they encoded messages in it to warn future generations about their mistakes to prevent suffering the same fate down the line. Yeah, I get it, sounds like a great plot for a movie, but completely improbable. Improbable, sure, but not impossible. History may have many more secrets than we know.
If you're still not convinced about the existence of the Black Knight satellite, you should know that in 1963, an Air Force test and fighter pilot and astronaut, along with NASA ground crew and tracking stations, actually saw, documented, and reported it during a space mission, only to quickly rescind the claim and instead cover up the fact that the object ever existed. In 1963, Gordon Cooper, an experienced pilot, became one of the first astronauts to go to space. In April of that year, he boarded the Mercury 9, and shortly after, he was living his anti-gravity dreams over 6,214 miles above the Earth's surface. During his descent back down to Earth, the landing module suffered from a total systems failure, but luckily, Gordon was able to land the spacecraft manually just 4 miles off target. That's pretty impressive. But believe it or not, that was not actually the most interesting thing to happen on the mission. While in space, Gordon had seen a green glowing object that ground crew and tracking stations confirmed. Not only that, but the object appeared to have been orbiting the Earth in retrograde, east to west. Unheard of technology at the time. NBC News picked up the story, but by the time Gordon made it back to Earth, the press was restricted from asking any questions about what he had seen, and NASA had released a statement claiming that an electrical malfunction had caused high levels of carbon dioxide in the ship's compartment, and that Gordon had hallucinated the whole thing. For years, Cooper went along with the narrative, that is, until he retired and decided to spill the tea. He claimed that what he and the ground crew saw during the Mercury 9 mission was in fact real, and not only that, but during his time working for the Air Force, he had witnessed hundreds of saucer-shaped spacecrafts being tested on military bases. I guess loyalty to liars in government can only last for so long.
Now, I'm sure we'd all love to believe that the Black Knight is something cool, like an object sent from the future or an alien probe as discussed before, or even a mundane thing like a piece of space junk if you're more nervous about that sort of thing. But could there be something more nefarious going on? Always, right? Maybe it's part of some secret government project. I mean, think about it. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were in a high-stakes race for technological and military superiority. It's entirely possible that one of these countries or even another government could have launched a covert satellite. And yes, as Hannah mentioned, it was supposedly first spotted long before the Cold War, but most of the attention to the Black Knight came in the 50s and 60s, so who knows if something else had been detected in the years prior. If the Black Knight is a government project, it could be used for all sorts of secret missions. It might be collecting intelligence, it could be monitoring communications, or even conducting space experiments that the public doesn't know about. Governments often keep advanced technology under wraps, and the Black Knight could be one of these hidden tools. This idea is definitely a much more down-to-earth explanation compared to time capsules or ancient tech, so I mean, who knows? Aside from space junk, this may be the next most possible explanation. On the morning of March 30th, 1988, Helen Thomas and her mom Carol set out for their usual walk to work at the local mill. They took the same route they always did, but on this particular morning, things would take a strange turn. Out of nowhere, they heard a low humming sound above them. Before they could make sense of it, a super bright light beamed down, blinding them completely. When the light finally vanished, Helen and Carol found themselves feeling dizzy and nauseous, and Helen's leather jacket was soaking wet, but the ground around them was completely dry. They were pretty shaken, but continued on to work anyway. When they arrived, though, the security guard told them they were hours late. In the days that followed, both women started developing blisters and rashes. It wasn't until years later that they reached out to Tony Dodd, a well-known UFO researcher. Under hypnosis, they revealed some unsettling details. They remembered being in a bright room, lying on tables with a weird net-like material holding them down as strange creatures with big heads and dark eyes performed bizarre experiments on them, even taking eggs from their bodies with a thin tube. One odd memory stood out as well. One of the aliens seemed fascinated by Helen's leather jacket, rubbing it on his face and hands until it was soaking wet. Gross. Now, hypnosis, I'm always a little iffy about that, you know, but the initial story of them being late for work after seeing the strange light and everything, that's all still very, very strange.
The glorification of Eucharist, or the Disputa of Eucharist as it's known in Italian, is a religious artwork painted in the 16th century by an Italian painter named Ventura Salimbeni. If you start from the bottom and work your way up, the piece starts off relatively normal, depicting a number of religious authorities gathered around an altar. But as your gaze meets the top of the painting, things get a little more interesting. The Holy Trinity, God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit, represented by a white dove, are shown sitting in the clouds, which would be all good and well and by the Holy Book if it weren't for the fact that it appears as though Jesus and God are being separated by some kind of large, spheric, metallic, ancient space satellite with telescopic antennas, a light at the top center, and a dial on the bottom left. While the depiction of the satellite has been highly debated, with many religious experts claiming that the orb is a representation of the universe, the light and dial the sun and moon, and the antennas scepter wands, many others claim that the glorification of the Eucharist is in fact proof of alien life and their influence on humanity. Or at the very least, this painting could prove the existence of time travel.
The Lizard Man. This next one is a full-on encounter with a reptilian being in Scape Ore Swamp, South Carolina. Usually anything close to an alien sighting is a UFO, and those are just unidentified flying objects. We really don't know if they have anything to do with extraterrestrials at all. But a humanoid reptilian or lizard-like creature, that sounds pretty alien to me. There's said to be a strange creature stalking the swamplands of Lee County, South Carolina, that being a big 7-foot-tall lizard man. On the 14th of July, 1988, sheriffs of Lee County were called to inspect damage done to a vehicle parked outside a home right next to the Scape Ore Swamp. Then a young man named Christopher Davis came out to make his own report to the police, saying that just 2 weeks prior, his car had also been damaged, only he'd actually seen the person, or rather the thing, that was responsible. Christopher described an encounter with a massive 7-foot-tall creature with 3 fingers per hand, red eyes, and green, wet, scaly skin. He'd been driving home from work one night when he got a flat tire. He'd gotten out of his car to fix it when he saw the thing making its way towards him. He jumped in his car and keeled off, but the creature was so fast that it managed to catch up to his speeding vehicle. Then it hopped onto the roof, scratching at it. Christopher hit the brakes, causing the thing to fly off his car before making his escape. When news of this report hit the papers, it caused a frenzy. More and more reports started coming in. The local radio station offered a $1 million reward to whoever could catch the beast, so hunters even started flocking to town to try and catch it. But reports began to die down by the end of the summer, and local sheriffs began writing off the supposed encounters as, get this, bear sightings. Because if there are two things that look so eerily similar, it's definitely a furry bear and a big green scaly lizard monster with red eyes and no hair to speak of.
In 2008, a strange piece of machinery was discovered in a mine in Vladivostok, Russia. It looked like a piece of tooth wheel, kind of like what you would see on modern-day gear-operated machinery. The object had been found embedded in a piece of coal. The man who discovered the object became curious about its origin, and so he showed it to a group of scientists who determined it to be 1. Man-made, constructed out of almost pure aluminum, and 2. Almost 300 million years old. Two conclusions that raised countless questions. 1. How did the object come to be? Because aluminum of such purity and shape are not found naturally. And as far as we once know, humans didn't figure out how to make anything close to this object until 1825. Of course, this has led many people to believe that the piece is a mechanism that somehow broke off of an alien spaceship. On the other hand, scientists aren't so sure, but with no other explanation of how it came to be, it's definitely a possibility.
In October of 1974, John Day was on the way back home to Essex with his family. The journey should have only taken about half an hour, but as he and his wife Susan were putting their kids to bed, they realized that they'd arrived home much later than they'd expected. An extra 3 hours had gone by. Over the next few days, the whole family started having terrifying nightmares, being sucked up into a strange craft before being operated on. John and Susan felt constantly anxious and confused. And not knowing what to do, John reached out to a local UFO group for advice. They suggested he talk to Leonard Wilder, a hypnotist experienced in cases of missing time. Under this hypnosis, John recalled driving into a weird bright mist that seemed to fall from the sky. He remembered seeing a bright light descending into a nearby field, then shooting towards their car. Before he knew it, the car was lifted into the sky. He then remembered being poked by sharp instruments. He also described the spaceship having furniture that was molded into the walls with no seams or joins. And the next thing he knew, they were back in their car driving up the driveway. Suffice to say, the whole experience left them with more questions than answers.
In 1998, an electrical engineer named John J. William discovered a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt, and so he dug it up. What he had discovered was a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared to contain some sort of electrical component. Williams later claimed that that electrical component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded inside to the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appeared to be man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, it was something else entirely. Furthermore, the rock was later dated to be at least 100,000 years old. Fast forward to today, and Williams is open to having others research the strange discovery, but he does have a few conditions. 1, he must be present for whatever discovery is made, and 2, the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern-day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, but no such discovery has been made, leading people to believe that the object must not have originated on Earth and is therefore proof of ancient extraterrestrial presence on our planet. It's possible. Anything's possible.
In 2004, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, 2 Navy pilots, were out doing a routine training exercise off the coast of San Diego when things took a weird turn. They got a call from an operator back at base who told them there was something odd in their airspace. This wasn't just a blip on the radar either. Apparently, the military had been tracking this unidentified flying object for weeks. It would do strange things like dive suddenly or just hover in place, and the operator asked Fravor and Slate to go check it out, and see if they could get a visual on whatever this thing was. And sure enough, after searching the skies for a bit, they finally spotted it. According to their reports, the UFO was about 40 feet long and was hovering roughly 50 feet above the ocean. Fravor decided to get a closer look and started descending towards the UFO, but just as he was getting closer, the thing rose to meet him before zipping away at a speed he couldn't even begin to match. And Fravor later said to reporters, "I can tell you, I think it was not from this world."
So this foreign object that landed on Mac Brazel's farm actually did so a few days prior to him calling into the sheriff's department. To be honest, he hadn't thought much of it until he started reading about Kenneth Arnold, flying saucers, and UFOs in the papers. Once he learned about the possible presence of technologically advanced ships with no known origin that likely came from outer space, he began to wonder if that was in fact what had landed on his farm just a few nights ago. And so he gathered up some of the debris and took them down to the local police station. In response, the sheriff immediately contacted the nearby army base, and soon intelligence officer Jesse Marcel had arrived on the scene and instructed Brazel to take him to the crash site so that the two could collect more debris. So let's talk about Jesse Marcel, the first military officer to step foot on the scene of the crash, because apparently Jesse had a lot to say, according to his son Jesse Jr., who went on to tell his father's story after his death in 1986. According to Jesse Jr., in 1947, when he was just 10 years old, his father woke him up in the middle of the night, excited after having visited the crash site. Jesse Jr. sat up as Jesse Sr. handed him some of the debris he had collected earlier that day on Brazel's farm, and he told Jesse Jr. to get a good look because the debris were something that he would never see again. They were not of this earth, and the pair simply could not make sense of them. Out of all of the debris his father had brought home, Jesse Jr. said that the one that fascinated him most was a small beam with purple-hued hieroglyphics. I suppose it's not difficult to see why the pair didn't believe the government when they released a report saying that what had been found on the Brazel's farm was nothing more than a discarded weather balloon. But of course, you don't mess with the government. And so for years, both Jesse Jr. and his father kept quiet about what they had seen. That is until in the late 1970s, a man named Stanton Friedman showed up asking questions. Stanton T. Friedman, a nuclear physicist turned ufologist, tracked down Jesse Sr. after being tipped off that a retired military man might know something about the Roswell incident, something that had been kept from the public for the past 31 years. And it turns out he did. Jesse Sr. told Freeman that the weather balloon story had in fact been a cover-up, and that the original wreckage had been replaced with a weather balloon shortly after military personnel first arrived on the scene. Not only that, but Jesse claimed that despite what their superiors had wanted them to believe, it was incredibly clear to everyone working on the site that the object had in fact been an extraterrestrial spaceship with outstanding craftsmanship and incredibly advanced out-of-this-world technologies. Although, unfortunately, Jesse did claim that he never got to witness the alleged aliens inside of the craft being pulled out, but still, he's ex-military, he was there. It's a pretty compelling case if you ask me.
There are also witnesses aside from Brazel's claiming to have seen some strange things. So many of these witnesses stayed silent for years, but eventually began speaking out to close friends or family about what they'd seen, still fearing repercussions from the government. There was another crash site about 40 miles from Brazel's ranch where more wreckage and alien bodies were said to be being recovered. A firefighter who went to this site claimed that he saw a large disc in the ground and several small, non-human bodies nearby. He said that military officials told him to keep quiet about what he saw. Sergeant Melvin Brown also shared his experience. He said he rode in a truck with the bodies from the crash site to Roswell Field and then stood guard at the hangar where they were first kept. He was instructed not to look under a tarp, but he got curious and he peeked. He claimed he saw 2 alien bodies. The government has always denied his claims, but several people who were there or knew people who were there have said they saw wreckage and bodies arrive at Wright Field. Retired General Arthur Exon stated that a top secret committee was set up to oversee the investigation of this and other classified UFO incidents. After the Roswell crash, the debris was secretly flown from Fort Worth, Texas to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. At Wright Field, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Exon, who later became the base commander, recalled that some of the material was very thin, but incredibly strong. And it wasn't just metal that arrived at Wright Field either. At the second crash site a few miles from the first, they discovered a smaller, more intact craft and 4 bodies lying nearby. These bodies did not look human. Again, according to witnesses, the bodies were described as being in fairly good condition despite having been exposed for 6 days. Some parts of the bodies have been chewed on by animals. Descriptions from those who saw the bodies are pretty consistent. They were said to be 4 to 5 feet tall, with big heads, large eyes, and small mouths. Basically your classic idea of an alien. They had thin bodies with long arms and 4 fingers. An army nurse who worked on the initial autopsy described how fragile the skulls and bones were too. The bodies were quickly placed in large, sealed wooden crates, loaded onto a B-29 bomber and flown to Fort Worth before being sent to Wright Field.
Now, the general public weren't the only ones concerned with the Roswell crash. In fact, one of the highest members of government was too, the president, which at the time was Harry S. Truman. After the incident took place, Truman became increasingly interested and concerned with UFOs, so much so that in 1948 he called a meeting with his military aide, Colonel Robert Laundrie, in the Oval Office to discuss UFO reports and what they might mean for the security of the country. Laundrie told Truman that, quote, all manner of objects and things were being seen in the sky by people as of late, which only led the president to worry more about the possibility of new, never-before-seen threats to the American people. And so Truman ordered a quarterly oral report from both Laundrie and the Air Force to be presented to him at the White House to discuss whether or not the UFO sightings would present any kind of immediate danger. Although neither the military or the Air Force were ever able or willing to provide Truman with any answers, the UFO sightings kept coming, and officials became more and more confused. To this day, it's unclear what information the government has gathered on UFOs, but what we do know is that if they do in fact have concrete evidence supporting the existence of alien life forms, they sure as heck aren't sharing it with us. Yet, fingers crossed.
The Roswell incident was the catalyst for pretty much every modern UFO conspiracy today. Before Roswell, the idea of aliens was just that, really, an idea. But when stories about this mysterious crash hit the papers, it really changed the public's view of the possibility of alien life forever. Suddenly, what people had read about in science fiction and fantasy novels or watched on the big screen was something a lot more concrete. Project Blue Book formed a few years after the Roswell incident, a genuine Air Force program dedicated to investigating UFOs, at least in the early days. Area 51, the mysterious Men in Black, Majestic 12, all of these things started being whispered about in the years following the Roswell incident.
And number 5 is mammoths. Part of the mammoth genus, these guys roamed North America millions of years back. They boasted distinct flat molars perfect for munching on rough vegetation, unlike the cusped teeth of mastodons. Intriguingly, despite similarities between mammoths and mastodons as proboscideans, the former shares a closer genetic bond with today's elephants, particularly the Asian elephant. This link highlights the incredible connection between species across epochs. At number 4 is the Homo florensis. In the Chronicles of Human Evolution, the story of Homo florensis, dubbed the Hobbit due to its small stature, continues to baffle scientists. Unearthed in the Indonesian island of Flores, these beings, standing slightly over 1 meter tall, introduced a narrative that didn't neatly fit into our established human family tree. Experts proposed various theories about their origins. Were they descendants of a Homo erectus, an ancient offshoot, or perhaps a group afflicted by a unique disease? The scientific community grappled with the understanding of the precise connection between Homo sapiens and this mysterious species. Previously, it was widely assumed that only Homo sapiens voyaged beyond Southeast Asia towards regions like New Guinea and Australia. The unearthing of Homo florensis on an isolated Indonesian island overturned this viewpoint, challenging the belief that ancient humans lacked the means to navigate through the region. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of prehistoric migration patterns, leaving a tale of mystery and curiosity in the annals of human evolution. And number 3 is this giant beaver. The story of Castoroides, or the giant beaver, is a curious tale of a truly colossal rodent that walked the lands of North America thousands of years ago. Unlike the beavers that we know today, these guys were behemoths weighing at a staggering 125 pounds, almost 3 times the size of modern North American beavers. Picture the beaver the size of a black bear wandering through the regions of the Great Lakes, venturing down into the American Northeast and even as far south as South Carolina. During the warmer spells, it even explored the icy terrains of Alaska Alaska and the Yukon, but when the temperatures plummeted, it was scurried back to the warmer climates down south. What's truly mind-boggling is the discovery of the remains of both modern beavers and these ancient giants in the same deposits, hinting at shared habitats and similar ways of life. The coexistence of these vastly different sized relatives paints an incredible picture of the diversity of life that once graced our world. At number 2 is the Megalodon. This behemoth is a lizard stretching up to 23 feet in length and weighing in more than a whopping 4,000 pounds, making it a colossal carnivorous force to be reckoned with. This awe-inspiring lizard wandered across grasslands, open forests, and woodlands, likely asserting dominance through a diet that included feasting on an assortment of sizable creatures like mammals, snakes, birds, and even fellow lizards. Its teeth, akin to serrated blades, might have been its perfect predatory weapon. What's particularly fascinating about this lizard is the debate around its potential venomous nature, which, if confirmed, would crown it the largest known venomous vertebrate to ever have existed. The idea of this colossal predator equipped with venom adds a spine-tingling layer to an already remarkable ancient giant. At number 1 is the Tasmanian Tiger. Not a true tiger, but a carnivorous marsupial, once possessed a unique and fascinating existence. Their appearance was akin to a combination of a stylish punk rock jackal with zebra-esque features, complete with a kangaroo-like pouch for their young. These elusive creatures roamed the Australian landscape, because of course they're from Australia, preying on kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, and possums. However, approximately 2,000 years ago, the Tasmanian tiger population took a significant hint. The arrival of Europeans and the introduction of dingoes hastened their decline. To make matters worse, between 1830 and 1909, a British company offered bounties for these creatures, further pushing them towards extinction. The final wild Tasmanian tiger was captured in 1933, marking the beginning of their captivity. Despite the occasional claimed sighting, no concrete evidence has emerged about their existence today, leaving their existence confined to history. The loss of these unique beings with their punk rock appearance and nurturing pouches stands as a significant event in the annals of extinct species.
In 2023, the Pentagon released footage that was taken in the Middle East the previous year. The footage was captured on July 12th, 2022, with an MQ-9 Reaper drone. They're still not sure what this object is. The mysterious orb footage was shown to a congressional committee as part of a defense update on UFOs or UAPs. We can clearly see a small round object that looks like it's shimmering as it flies over houses and empty fields. Sean Kirkpatrick, who heads the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the AARO, mentioned that this footage is pretty much all the info they have on this thing. They don't know where it came from or what its purpose was. The Pentagon also disclosed that they were looking into over 650 incidents involving UFOs.
Next up, if we are going to do a video about real alien photos, I feel it's only right to include a photograph of the most famous UFO sighting and interaction to date, the Battle of Los Angeles, or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, which took place on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was directed to go under blackout by the US military. After all the lights on the ground turned off, the sky above LA was suddenly lit up by a large handful of strange, unidentified flying objects. The military then opened fired into the sky, and the public watched in utter shock as 1,400 rounds of ammunition fired at the airborne, seemingly extraterrestrial objects appeared to have no effect whatsoever. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. 5 civilians died after being hit by materials that appeared to have ricocheted off of the intended targets. 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more died of heart attacks due to the stress of the event, which was 2 hours long in total. If this isn't legit, I don't know what is. That's pretty crazy.
Next up, we have some mysterious UFO footage that was taken in Wales. So in September of 2016, a police helicopter flying over the Bristol Channel in Wales around 9 p.m. spotted something in the sky. It was only visible on the chopper's thermal camera, cruising at about 106 miles per hour against the wind. Former cop Gary Haseline later released the full video footage, urging the UK government to come forward with whatever they knew about UFOs. Of course, they didn't. Police thought it could have been a drone at first, but the object was moving pretty fast. faster than any known models at the time. Apparently the thing was picked up by local air traffic control and emitted heat. Hasteline stated, "This is verified police helicopter FLIR footage showing an object not seen with the naked eye but clearly seen in the infrared spectrum. It is moving against the wind, so it is not a balloon, nor is it emitting any heat signature indicating a propulsion system."
Next up, we have a photograph taken on May 1st of 1952 at 7:58 a.m. by George Adamski, who claims to have seen multiple UFOs flying over his backyard in Mount Palomar during the 1940s all the way through to the 1960s. Although many renowned UFO experts have been unable to back his claims, Adamski maintains firm in his belief that he was able to capture not only this image of a cigar-shaped mothership flying in front of the moon seen here, but also the image of 6 unidentified flying objects he believes to be alien spacecrafts arising from the moon and flying in formation, which you can now see here. These images gained such notoriety in their time that for a while a rendering of the 6 spacecraft photograph was featured in a postage stamp in Grenada in 1978. Not only did Adamski claim to have taken a number of other images, which were unfortunately destroyed, he also claimed to have communicated with the aliens aboard these ships using symbols, hand gestures, and even telepathy. Whether or not he's telling the truth, I personally believe he would make a hell of an entertaining dinner guest.
This footage was captured in 2004 by Mexican Air Force pilots. They'd been on a routine flight when they spotted several glowing objects on their infrared cameras. They couldn't actually see the objects with the naked eye. There were 13 of these objects in total, flying over the skies of southern Campeche state. This is a solid piece of footage right here. At one point we get a nice long look at the glowing objects flying in perfect formation across the sky, and yeah, I don't know what they are. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but the pilots also had no idea what they were picking up and tried to pursue the objects, but they just lost track of them. They flew away at incredible speed. The footage wasn't released until 2010, and ever since, it's been cited as one of the most convincing examples of a genuine piece of UFO footage.
And finally, we have some more video footage coming to us straight from the declassifieds. I'm talking about UFO documents released to the public by the Pentagon after so many years of adamantly denying the existence of such phenomena. On January 15th of 2023, cameras were set up to survey an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft when all of a sudden, an unidentified aerial presence was captured on that same video, moving at speeds unreachable by any kind of modern-day aircraft. It was shocking to say the least, but it actually gets crazier. The object was moving so fast that it appeared to actually disrupt the atmosphere surrounding the craft, leaving behind an atmospheric wake in lieu of a jet stream as it disappeared completely into the sky. It sounds pretty unbelievable, but as I said, the footage was literally released by the Pentagon, who have done a complete 180 on their denial of UFOs and have now actually asked the public to come forward and submit any authentic images or encounters with UFOs or UAPs to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the ADARO. But I would personally love it if you shared any stories you have down below.
X-Files.
I've never seen X-Files.
Really? Oh man, you gotta check it out for sure.
Oh man!
You've seen Aliens?
Yeah,
Why don't you
I'm
include
like,
that on the list?
Oh, part 2, you guys.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Part 2 will be all our personal experiences with aliens, which I have none, unfortunately. Well, I've been your host, James.
I've been your host, Hannah. We will see you in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. This video is about real encounters with demons from the Bible that will leave you shaking from head to toe. Are you too scared to check it out? Click the video now. Viewer discretion is heavily advised.